and welcome to Dr. Sean Says Invaluable Notation. Today, we're going to talk about all of the various note values and how they relate to one another.
Wait just 1 second there, Dr. Sean. Note values? What kinds of value are we talking about here? What note is the most valuable? Can I get a good exchange rate? How many notes do I need to get in on crypto?
Not that kind of value. I mean that when we read Western European style written notation, notes have durational values, i.e. they last for a certain amount of time. So when we say note values, what we're talking about are how long notes last with regard to one another. Understanding how duration works is an essential skill for reading sheet music.
That sounds really tough. There are so many circles and lines, I just don't even know where to begin.
Don't get discouraged. I can help demystify note values by exploring fractions.
Fractions? I need to do math!
Math? That's not what I signed up for, buddy!
It'll be okay, I promise. Let's get started. A common misconception is that note values are fixed. People think they represent an unyielding duration that is always the same. As it turns out, this is not the case. Instead, notes are more like ratios or fractions. Their duration is dependent on a number of factors, but their relationship to each other always remains intact.
Wait, I thought you said note values weren't fixed. How can their relationship remain intact but their values not be fixed? I'm confused.
Well, think of it like this. If I have a large coffee and you have a small coffee, we can both drink half of our coffees, right?
Yeah!
Okay, great. So, while the relationship between us and our coffees are the same, we both drank half. Because I have the larger coffee, I actually had more coffee than you. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But what does any of that have to do with note values?
Just like the sizes of our coffees, the actual duration of note values are dependent on an external factor, the size of the cup for our coffee and the overall tempo for note values. So, while the same note might last a longer or shorter amount of time depending on how fast or slow the piece is going, the relationships between the notes will always remain the same.
Okay, I get it now. Even though we both drank half of our coffees, you drank more coffee. And even though I might hear the same note value in two different pieces, the one with the faster tempo will last a shorter amount of time.
Exactly. You're brilliant! Let's take a look at how note values are broken down. First up, we have the whole note. We can think of the whole note as being equal to 1, or a ratio of 1 to 1. It's one whole. Get it? The whole note is always notated as an open circle, also called a note head, for future reference. Next, we have the half note, which you may have guessed is equal to 1/2 of a whole note, or the fraction 1/2. That means 2 half notes will add up to a single whole note. Half notes also get an open note head, but then we add this line here that we call a stem. A quarter note gets half of the duration of the half note, meaning it will take 4 of them to equal a whole note, or the fraction 1/4. However, we only need 2 quarter notes to equal 1 half note. Wow! quarter notes get a solid note head and a stem. Next up, we have the eighth note, which is half the duration of a quarter note. You guessed it, that means this duration is best represented as the fraction 1/8 because it will take 8 of them to add up to a single whole note. Eighth notes will have a solid note head, a stem, and a flag. I'm sure by now you've noticed the pattern of relationships for note values.
I think so. Each successive note value is half of the previous one.
Exactly. So the next one will be the 16th note, or the fraction 1/16.
It looks like this note adds another flag to the eighth note. Will that be the case going forward? Each subsequent note value just adds another flag?
That's pretty much right. Let's take a quick look at all of these note values together. We can also notate silence, known as rests, where the performer won't play anything for a certain duration. Rests work the same way as notes. They're proportional to each other. Take a look.
Okay, I understand that note and rest values are like fractions or ratios, but there has to be more to notation than that.
Good thought. We can also have what we call dotted note values.
Dotted notes? What does that mean?
Don't worry, it's going to be okay. Dotted notes allow us to get at the durations in between each subsequent note value. Dotting notes adds to the total duration of the note. Like everything else dealing with duration, how much duration we add is dependent on the context, but the relationship of a dot to a note is always the same. Dots will always add half of a note's value to its total duration, so this dotted half note here will be held out for the total duration of one half note plus one quarter note. Wow!
I understand! That means a dotted quarter note will be held out for the total duration of a quarter plus an eighth note.
Exactly. You're a genius. We can dot rests as well, and the process works in exactly the same way. The dot adds half the rest's value to its total duration. Let's take a quick look at some special guidelines for how to write note values when a staff is involved. When we're placing notes on the staff, we need to make sure that our stems and flags are pointing in the right direction. There are a few guidelines you can use to make sure you're always on the right side of the staff. Keep in mind that these guidelines apply no matter which clef we're using. Treble, bass, alto, tenor, these rules will be in effect. First, when it comes to flags, they will always point to the right, regardless of whether the stem goes up or down. Next, any notes below the middle line will have their stems on the right side of the note head and pointing up. Finally, notes on or above the middle line will generally have their stems on the left side of the note head and pointing down. Some of these guidelines might seem a little picky, but keep in mind that consistency matters when you're trying to accurately convey lots of information. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on what Dr. Sean says. That's all for now. Take care, folks.